On today's episode, we did something a little off cue, if you get
Little
my
different.
drift. A little Q&A here. We took the whole episode dissecting a question from one of our beautiful listeners out there. And it has a lot to talk about.
So please, listen in and send those emails.
Let's talk about death, baby. Let's talk about grief and mourning. Is it argumental or existential? What's it mean to me? Let's talk about death.
Hi, I'm Benny Capal, and I'm a funeral professional.
And I'm Nicholas Capal, a psychologist.
Hey, Nick, let's talk about death.
Let's do it.
So we take a lot of time. We go through these emails. First of all, thank you everybody who sends in your thoughts, your comments, your emails. And we usually have our Q&A session at the end of the episode, but I want to do something a little different. I think you would agree with this. We got a really awesome email here that I think we should spend some time. And I think you as listeners need to know how important it is that you send us these emails, because this kind of conversation that Doc and I are going to just delve into is exactly what we do every time you send an email. So please keep sending them at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. But today we're going to go into one specific email. Hey there, Dr. Nick and Benny! Exclamation mark. I like this. It's a good start from the beginning.
Whew. Ready to rock.
If you read this on the podcast, I'll be forever grateful. Not to hear my own story and questions, but because it might help others asking the same thing. I want to start out by saying thank you. Thanks for the sincerity of your podcast, your hearts, and the calling to help others. Thanks for everything you do in your community and everyone you reach out on here. I promise you, Doc, we and listeners, we did not pay this person to write this.
Very nice words.
So thank you. Continuing. I started listening to you about a year ago, just trying to have some questions answered about death and pre-planning. I'm huge on that and advocate to others it's 100% necessary. Some think I'm crazy, but it's part of life. Everyone will die. People plan for weddings, births, and all sorts of lifetime milestones. But why don't we plan for our own funerals? Probably because people are scared, and sometimes it makes what we know more of a reality. What I didn't realize from listening to you both was how much you would educate me, but also help me deal with the unresolved grief from 17 years ago. I used to blame myself for not being there when my grandpa passed away and not being able to save him. Nobody could. He had a massive coronary, was gone before help arrived, and while that was medically what happened, he was also suffering from a broken heart of losing his wife, in quotations, my grandma, of 59 years and past 6 months after her. My significant other lost his father roughly 23 years ago. It was extremely unexpected. He went to bed one night and never woke up. He stuffed all of his feelings down, put them in an emotional box, and locked it away. He has never dealt with the pain and the grief of losing his dad. I suppose that's how some handle grief, but I don't agree and have been trying to get him to let go slowly for his own health and healing process. When his dad passed away, his family chose to have a visitation, then cremation. His ashes have been passed from his garage to his brother's, back and forth over the years. The plan was to spread them eventually alongside his mother when she passes in the future. Unfortunately, a week back, his nephew, in his young 30s, passed away suddenly. This brought up so many memories for him and opened the emotional box again. Again, the family decided on a visitation and cremation. Now, people have decided to bury those ashes along with his dad's ashes. He's very hurt by this. Wants some ashes to keep in his garage, but will likely go along with everyone else to not ruffle feathers. How do I help him heal and let go without upsetting him? How do I coax him to let his family know his wishes? How can I be there, or what do I say without coming off as I don't care or be insensitive? I very much care, but I also think that in some weird way, burying his father's ashes might help him with his closure he has never had before. I know there's a lot here to discuss and work through. I also understand there is not one silent answer that works for everyone. Thank you for taking the time to read this and answer my question. Miss A. Doc, your thoughts?
So I wrote down a couple things while we were reading it, just so that I made sure that I could go through point by point. So Ben, if you have a counterpoint, just come in whenever.
You got it.
So the first point I wrote down was the advocation for pre-planning. I think it's obviously something that we have stressed on episodes prior. It's very important. It will really help you not only for the day that you die, but I think it's better for the whole family to. It's part of the healing process. Maybe it's kind of a grief ceremony before the actual death, is to talk about the things that are important to this person that's, maybe not even sick at this point. Just,
Well, it's also like, as we've talked about before, and if you haven't, please check out our other episodes. You'll hear a lot about this. But basically, it's just, it takes so much stress, not only on the individual that's pre-planning, but everybody who has to come in contact with those pre-needs later, as in family members, grandkids, et cetera, et cetera. Because let's be honest, Doc, some people never talk about their death plans. And even when they do pre-planning with Dad and I, a lot of the times they don't tell the whole family what they're pre-planning. So a lot of the times, some of these kids will come in not ever knowing that Dad or Mom pre-planned. So that surprises them. But I will say 99% of the time, the kids or the spouse are extremely happy that that side is done, whether there is monetary put down, even if it was just.
Can I change the word happy to relieved?
Yes, that would be a better word. Relieved. A lot less pressure on them.
Tension.
And so what I was going to say is, even if they came and just said what their wishes were for cremation versus burial, or where they're supposed to be buried, or even just their dates on when they served, or when they got married, or the degrees they earned. A lot of people don't talk about those things. So it's just nice to have all that information there. But that's not what this whole question is about. So first of all, thank you so much for the kind words. Thank you for bringing up pre-need, and that people just need to start talking about their wishes for what they want when that day comes. Now, Doc, the next part of this email is about something that
I got notes. I got notes here. I got notes here. So my next note, that was note 1. Thank you for your fill-in. Next note was everyone dies. Obviously, we've said that multiple times. We talk about death anxiety all the time. It is a true statement. We all will meet our demise one day. Hopefully not soon, but it will happen. So I think that's an important note to just continue to drill in, if you will. And then this starts the conversation, right? This is the note that really starts the conversation for me. So why don't we plan funerals? That was one of the things you talked about, Miss A. I'm going to let Ben take the reins on this one, but I think one of the reasons why a lot of people tend to avoid planning for funerals is multiple reasons, obviously, but one of them is, I think it's the fear that if I start talking about this, then it becomes real. I think it's, if I begin to contemplate what I want people to see or hear on the day that they come to visit me, then I think it makes it really real. And death is so scary. And it's okay to feel that way. But I would challenge all the listeners out there, if you feel that way, if you feel that ick, or you feel that I can't go there, start writing about it. Start talking to yourself about it. This doesn't have to be out loud. This doesn't have to be with anybody, but just with yourself. Take some time to ask yourself these questions. What do I really want my funeral to look like? And the reason why I say that is because it's going to help open some probably closed doors for you. And I think the more that you are comfortable talking to yourself about it first, the better you will get at talking to other people about it. So sometimes it's better to start within before we go out, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Benny?
It does. And I think there's a lot more reasons why people don't pre-need. I think one of the reasons is funeral homes and funeral directors in general have a stigma of being very intimidating. I think for a lot of people, I hear it a lot that Dad was meaning to come and talk to you and never got there, or Mom was meaning to come. So I think the idea is there. I think for some people, the idea is planned, and they really do mean to come here. But I think in the list of things that are important in the day, I think for a lot of people, going to your local funeral home and doing your pre-need may not be on the top doc. I think another thing too is the monetary side. Some people don't realize that you can go and pre-need and not put money down. You can actually just do an information file or do a pre-need or get the pre-need set up.
Okay, just pause real quick. What is an information file?
Well, so I look at I look at a pre-need as a pre-need. You give money, right? You put money down for the actual services and arrangement for what you want. I look at an information file as I'm not really sure what I want to do, and I don't want to take my life insurance out, or I don't want to put a lot of money in yet. But I do want to, the local funeral home or the funeral director and my family to know this is the place that I want to be buried. This is the place I want my funeral to be. This is the kind of songs I want. These are all my information, as in when I went to school, what degrees, what year I got married. Things that like maybe you don't really necessarily, groups you were in, right? I was in the Moose Lodge for 4 years and the Moose Lodge number is this, or I think a lot of people when they hear pre-need, they're like, well, we don't have the money, so we're not going to do it, right? We don't want to embarrass ourselves, and that's the thing too, right? There's a lot of money that goes into pre-need a lot of the time. And I think some people are just very unnerved by talking about money to other people. There's a trust thing, right? The older generation, that is starting to, slowly die out, no pun intended, they had a different thing because they lived through the Great Depression, right? So trusting things like trusts and banks is very tough on them.
Okay, so Ben, thinking about this, do you think that just by coming in and visiting with your funeral directors, or maybe even going around to talk to a couple funeral directors before that, but to find the one that you can trust, the one that's going to actually take care of you and your family, do you think that process in itself is relieving, if you will?
I think it's both, right? I think it is a relief when you find that, but I'm sure it's extremely stressful, especially if you're going from one funeral home to another, right? Because let's be honest, Doc, most funeral directors are good at what they do, or they wouldn't be doing what they're doing, right? So I would like to say that you're really you're kind of going with a gut after that, right? I mean, some people are very money conscious, but I think for most people, it's really the feeling you get with that funeral director. Now, let's be honest too, most people are going to a local funeral home. So in most areas, unless you're in a big city, there's one or two, right? There's, one or two, maybe 5 at the most, but you're really going from, big city where you're dealing with 20, 30, so I think it is. I really do think it is for some a thing, but I think for the most part, I think it goes back to most people don't want to pre-need because they don't want to talk about their death. We'll deal with that later. Like that's something we'll get to down the line, and then they never get to it.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
All right, so here's my next point. Okay, so listening to the email,
okay,
there was a part about couldn't be there for Papa, couldn't save him.
Yeah, her grandfather.
And I keep circling the word save because I think this is a human complex that we all struggle with control, right? We have the savior complex. We think we are able to save people or to change situations or to control things that honestly are completely out of our control. It's like wanting to control the hurricanes that are coming in right now from, and nailing the East Coast. But like the reality is that we tend to do this a lot. We tend to take the knowledge that we have today, the knowledge that we, the maturity, everything we've learned, everything we've seen, and we go back in time and judge our previous selves. Right. And we're like, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I spend more time with grandpa? Or why didn't I, tell the nurse this? But, whatever the thought process is. And I'm going to challenge that and say this. At that moment in time, I would venture to say most of us, if not all of us, did not know that was the day that Papa was going to die. If we would have known that, we would have absolutely changed our plans, our schedule. We would have made time. We would have made sure we were there. But unfortunately, this is the beauty and chaos of life. We don't know.
I like that.
Don't know.
I like the beauty and chaos. I think that's an interesting. Those are very interesting to equate to death. But I want to bring up something that she also put in that same thing about her grandfather, and that was, even though it was a massive coronary that took him, he was also dealing from a broken heart of losing his wife within 6 months. I wonder, Doc, is part of that emotional regret, right? That nobody could help him, nobody could save him. Do you think part of that also is maybe they're a little bit, I don't want to say this in a selfish way, but I think there's some truth to this humanity that they're relieved that he could be back with his loved one, right? If he's heartbroken, and she even says in this note that the coroner took him, but he was also dealing with a broken heart from losing his wife. Do you think part of maybe some of the, I don't know, pressure or some of the maybe the regret that she has is that she was okay with it because maybe he wouldn't have to deal with the broken heart anymore?
Well, we got to be careful talking for people because we don't know.
Absolutely.
But I would absolutely believe that I see it a lot with cancer patients, right? Where they're so sick and they're so miserable, and their day to day is, I'm going to put this in my terms, it's hell, right? And I think that there comes a point with seeing so much pain in someone else that we want it to go away. So yeah, absolutely. Is that a human trait? Absolutely, right? We don't want to see things suffer. We don't want to see humans. We don't want to see animals unless we have no conscience or empathy. And then that's obviously something that you probably should go talk about with a therapist if you don't have that. But like, the thing is that, it's so complex. It's so, it was it the broken heart? Was it the coronary? Was it, I could say this to answer the question. I think that there was obviously a lot of stress on the heart, whether we call that from the pain of losing a loved one or literally stress of going through his own health issues, dealing with that. It's unfortunate, but again, for this, Miss A, there's nothing you could have done. There's nothing you could have done. And it's very easy to get caught up in that complex of judging yourself for something you didn't know.
Well, and here's another thought too, Nick, on this that she wrote, and I'm reading through lines, so I apologize, Miss A, if I'm reading something, but I think this is something to talk about too. There also was gone before help arrived, so he died alone. It was what I'm getting from this, and maybe that's part of it too, is that she wished she could have at least been there when it happened, right? So he could have transitioned with somebody else around instead of by himself. Though, going back to the should-haves, would he have wanted somebody else there?
Well, and I mean, this talks immediately in my mind. I go especially back to my existential, and it's the isolation, right? To see someone die alone automatically, I would assume, brings your own fear of dying alone, right? So you see that, and you're like, oh, that must have been so sad and miserable, and to not be able to hold someone's hand. And don't get me wrong, this is all true, right? For most people, just having someone there to share that moment with would probably be better than doing it alone. But then again, I think of like cats, right? And cats will, in death, when they're about to die, they will try to avoid, like they will go off and die, privately. So I think that, we are, we're animals, right?
Why specifically cats? Why can't we add dogs to that?
I know cats are the ones that we always talk about.
Dogs do it though.
Some dogs do. Do.
Where the red fern grows.
Yeah. Oof, that's a good book. Good book.
Very good book.
All right. So that's the other thing is, like, it depends. Some people want to share that moment, and I would say some people don't. So again, and of course, we don't know your papa or grandpa or whatever. Did we call
him? It's grandpa. I think
grandpa.
It's grandpa.
Yeah, your grandpa. So, I want to normalize that. I absolutely understand your pain that you have for him dying alone and wanting to be there for him. But at the same time, you didn't know. And I would imagine if I was sitting across the table from you and asked you the question, if you knew it was his last day, would you have been there? You would absolutely have been there. So give yourself a little leeway. Okay, Ben, here's my next one.
Yep. I'm ready.
So the next note I had was men grief.
Oh yeah. I was literally thinking the same
thing. Idea of so the two things I have is that first I think we have to discuss boys men typically are raised to avoid feelings. They're allowed to show certain feelings, but they're very limited feelings, such as you're allowed to show anger. Anger is, kind of a manhood.
Yeah.
You gotta.
Show me that anger.
You gotta buck off all the boys that are getting in your way.
You gotta
right?
show.
So, but with that being said, anger, as we know, is an outward sign of depression. It's an outward side of sadness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Men typically do not go to sadness because they want to be the strong one.
Well, and that's another thing too, Doc, because in the Star Wars franchise, anger leads
to the darkness,
to the dark side,
to the darkness,
to the dark side. Anyway, so yeah, there's. Can we sum up this significant other's story here? Because there's 3 parts to this. Is that going to be okay, or is that going to mess up your notes?
Well, can I go through just go one more note with this?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the other note I had was you made the comment of helping him to let go. And I would challenge you to change that in your mind of letting go to acceptance, to just understanding that it's there. Because I think that's the first step. For any of this, for any change to happen, we have to accept that it's a problem. It exists, right? So, and I'm not saying grief is a problem. I'm saying that if it is tearing him up at night, or if it's preventing him from being, happy, or whatever negative consequence this is happening here, then I would challenge you to help him explore and label. What are you actually feeling right now? What is it that, because the other note that I come to is that then right after this, the nephew dies, right? So now we have unresolved grief coming in here, because when the nephew died, here's another big death in this person's life. And I would imagine if he's not dealt with his father's death, this is going to bring that into the foreground. And we're also going to a funeral with his nephew, who I would imagine, just like we say parents shouldn't see their children die, seeing your nephew die is not something that we should be seeing either. So we're talking about complex grief. We're talking about unresolved grief.
Hold on. You didn't bring in first his significant or his wife. Sorry, there was something before his father. Right?
I thought it was father, and then it was the nephew.
Shouldn't expect I thought. No, keep going. What you're thinking. Yeah, no, I know about the father, and I know about the
significant
nephew.
Other is who she's talking about.
Okay, I got.
She's talking about her significant other.
I misread that.
Well, good thing I was paying attention.
Yeah, thank you.
What I mean? But anyways, we have multiple, and I know it's going to be really hard to talk about all these avenues, but like in my mind, I would imagine that the death of his father being something that he probably is unresolved is coming into foreplay with the nephew dying, because that's 2 traumatic deaths. And if he hasn't dealt with the first one, it's absolutely going to affect the second one. So we have unresolved grief going on. We have complex grief going on. And then on top of that, he's a man. So, and again, I think we're doing a better job with our children nowadays, but I still think in a lot of cultures, men are raised and trained to be the strong, silent type. And one of the traits of that is to bury unhealthy or unwanted feelings, because crying is a sign of weakness. And that's how men are raised, is that if you cry, you are weak. Now, I'm not saying this is true. I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is the way it is.
Well, and there's another portion to this too, right? We can go a little bit Freudian here, Doc. This is more your realm than mine, but he lost his father, right? So now there's that whole, now you're the men of the house, right? You become this because you lose your father at such a young age, right? I'm just assuming this 23 years ago, kind of reminds me of grandpa, right? Has massive coronary, dad's 35. There's certain things that you are expected by society to do, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. That's how it is. So on top of losing his father, which losing your father as a son is a very emotional turbulence, because there is this whole, at that young age, right? Your father has so much more to teach you, wisdom, et cetera, et cetera. And you were basically, that was stolen from you. So on top of, not to mention, this could have been the individual that taught him how to deal with grief later on, that he never had the opportunity.
If he taught him, because it said 23 years ago. So we don't know how old these people are.
Right,
that could have been
absolutely.
when he was a young kid.
That's what I'm.
So
that's what I'm saying.
then the dad didn't teach him how to grieve.
That's what I'm saying. He was stolen of that. He might have had the opportunity with his dad to have those conversations he never had. So not only that too, but if it's unexpected, they don't even know what his wishes were. So now there's guilt too. Did we do the right thing? Did we not do the right thing? Is it right that we're literally going from one garage to another? This is what me and my brothers want, but is this what dad would have want? And there's that whole thing
I think we talked about this too. The whole complex feelings involved in an urn. Where does it go? Who gets it? Do we split it? Because I think another problem is, I feel like some people struggle with the idea of splitting the ashes, because then dad's not completely somewhere. Right. So there's all these. And again, I'm not saying this is everybody's family that deals with cremation, but when we put things in urn, they have to be in a specific area, right? So the thing then becomes, who gets it? Who gets it? How did you get it 6 months of the year?
Let's challenge this, right? Here's a thought that may have never come up in discussion. So let me walk through the line. So the original goal, and it is stated here, is they were going to eventually bury these cremains.
Yeah, but it was without the acceptance of everybody.
Correct. No. I'm not done yet. The original plan was to have dad's cremains buried. Now this new nephew passes, kind of throws a whole new wrench into the system, and now they want to bury both dad's ashes and the nephew's ashes. This individual's significant other doesn't want to do that. He wants to keep a little bit for himself, right? What's the problem? And I challenge you to ask your significant other to have a conversation with the rest of his family, brothers included. Is it okay if we bury a portion of dad and I be able to keep a little bit?
So it wasn't burying, it was spreading with mom. They were going to spread the ashes with mom, if I remember correctly. Right? Something like...
Plan was to spread eventually alongside his mother when she passes in the future.
Yeah, so they were going to take both mom and dad and spread them. So again, this is where I'm saying the complex of, if we...
Oh, so they're rushing up the spreading of the cremains because of the nephew.
Right, because the nephew died. Now they're thinking, let's put grandpa with...
I get it.
Nephew.
Well, why don't you as one of the sons say, is it okay if I have a little bit of dad for myself?
Well, it's again, this was my next note, right? She says that he doesn't want to ruffle, or she doesn't want him to ruffle, or he doesn't want to ruffle any feathers by saying that.
But they might not have any problems with that.
Right. But again, this comes to the point of men typically struggle with expressing their emotions. So when it comes to like something like ashes, which is very emotionally drawn, for him to go against his family wishes, he might feel guilty about that.
But what I'm saying is how does he know that's going against the wishes unless he asks?
Well, it says that the family wants to bury grandpa with nephew.
Yeah, but they might not have had the conversation where he brought it up. Well, is it any possible way
I would imagine that the discussion never happened.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think it hurts anybody to bring up the discussion and find out. They might say, oh, absolutely, keep whatever you need for yourself. Right. And we'll scatter the rest, because that way you still have a little bit of your dad. You can even collect a little bit for later down, not only for yourself, but to have a little bit for when mom passes, right? So you can do the original plan. And there's part of that too, right? So change is very scary to begin with. And now you're changing the original plan, which was to scatter mom and dad's ashes together, correct? Now,
right.
That was the whole thing. So now we're speeding up the process because of this nephew. Why can't you have the discussion?
Maybe his brother or sister, whoever the nephew is, sibling, right? Maybe the sibling thought this would be really a way to
That's it. Now that I'm thinking about it, because it would be one of the siblings' kid that died.
Yes, right.
So now he's worried that his brother or sister is going to be struggling with
the grief.
They want to make that decision to scatter them both.
Right. And if I ask to,
am I stepping on their
grief? Well, and on top of that, by taking that, and then is that going to cause another issue? Like, why don't we take all of that, or why can't everybody get a piece of it? And then the people that wanted Grandpa to be buried with nephew maybe are like, well, that kind of defeats the whole purpose. Is that Grandpa was supposed to be with nephew? So again, like I said, there's just so much complexity here. And then you talk about, how do I coax him, right? How do I help him? My honest opinion, my straightforward answer to that would be to just be there with him, to build his self-esteem, right? To say, yeah, this really stinks. And unfortunately, in this situation, I would imagine we're kind of on a time crunch, because if they're going to bury, there's probably dates and stuff being thought about here, right? To bury Grandpa with nephew, there's going to be dates coming up soon. So if he's going to make and here's where it gets really sticky, because if he doesn't speak up for himself now, he may regret that the rest of his life too. So the problem is that if you force him to do it, it may help the situation in that he will be able to at least be heard before Grandpa gets buried. However, it's also going to be a lot of pressure on your significant other, because your significant other is going through multiple griefs at the moment, and he is trying to accept the deaths of both, I would imagine, his father and his nephew. And then, like we said, there's a lot of complexities with the family to family issue. So,
well, it's the empathy too, right? I'm looking at, that would be like you losing your son while we just lost our dad, right? We lost our dad, and now you lose
No. Dad died 23 years ago.
Yeah, but I get it. But then now your son dies, and you tell me I want to bury Dad with my son. There is that extra now where I'm empathetic to, how can I tell my brother or sister that just lost their child, which we've, by the way, check out our episode on child grief. Now, I don't want to be the person that has to say, this is going to help you with your grief journey, but I'm not comfortable with it.
Right.
So that I get it now. Now that's
what I'm saying. There's so much complexity here. And the other issue that is, if you, this is the other thing, the family dynamic, I would imagine, is not necessarily in a negative way, but it's in crisis. Because there's a shifting going on, right? Especially when, your sibling just lost their child, right? You're trying to be as supportive as you possibly can, I would imagine, but at the same time giving them space to make the decisions that they need to make. However, this decision is not only affecting them, it's affecting you. And in that case, I think you have in my personal experience, you have every right to speak your truth. But again, forcing someone to do that when they're not ready to could be harmful.
Well, and I'm not saying this works for everybody, but I do know in these situations, Dad and I try to challenge the family to at least wait 12 months before doing anything hasty. Not saying that, obviously, if they want to bury their son, like, that's their choice, right? But when it comes to burying a father there was already plans set to scatter cremains. Now, I understand that when you lose your child, you're probably not thinking about plans that were made 23 years ago. But I can also say that maybe just, honestly, maybe just the best thing, Doc, is to have the siblings get together.
Well, and the other thing I didn't even think about, but what if Nana was the one that said, "Hey, this might be a good idea."
Ooh.
So now we got the matriarch now stepping in.
You should bury your son with my
with
husband.
Because that way he's not alone,
Wow.
or that.
So then there's
complexity.
extra pressure from the
Absolutely.
matriarch, especially if they lost their father at an early age. She probably
she might
probably
be
runs the roost.
She might be the glue, right? And if whatever she says goes kind of situation, I could imagine that could be very, very difficult to speak up.
That discussion, yeah. Well, there is a little bit of a silver lining in this situation. If you bury cremains, you can always go back and get them.
Yeah, but you're also talking about money, I would imagine, right?
There is money involved. But at the end of the day, to keep your mind clear, now, depending on where this is.
Hold on a second. You said cremains, but what if the cremains are buried with a body?
You can still
exhume, right?
You can still exhume and reintern.
But how do you do that? What's the process of that?
Well, we don't know the state.
Right.
We don't know the state, and technically, you're really not supposed to put cremains in with somebody else.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a 2-for-1 situation. Yeah. You're not really supposed to do that. But let's say that it's like the cemeteries around here, Doc, where you can bury 2 cremains in one plot. At the end of the day, this individual, the significant other, has to weigh out what's more important.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
What's more important? Is it more important to just kind of keep the truth or keep the truths and just let them do what they need to do, and that is less stress for me? Or is it more, I need to say this, and if you need to say this, I challenge you to say it because it's important.
So let's say your wife is dealing with this same situation. The bigger question is, how does Miss A help? That's what she's asking.
So me as the significant other.
Yes. So let's say your wife is dealing with this situation, and
that is the conversation. I'd say, what is more important to you? Is more important to you keeping everybody happy and not yourself? Or is it more important for you to at least get your thought out there? We don't even know what they would say, right?
And the other thing is I really think it's again, just being there and being patient and allowing them to explore. Like, are you going to have regrets?
Well, going back to that, I think that's it. You say the same thing. Is it worth it? Let them make up their own decision, right? But then they also know that you're listening to them. They're being heard.
Yep.
They're allowed to make the decision they need to make, and maybe challenge them in ways that I never thought about certain things.
Yeah, it's just word of advice from me as a psychologist who specializes in this. I think it's just important to share the space, allow them the space to think about this stuff. And maybe sometimes you do have to put a little bit of confrontation, because this is a timely decision. Unfortunately, by confronting this, you may also be putting rifts in your marriage.
Yeah. Well, not a significant other.
Significant other. Yeah.
Significant other.
Your relationship.
But you could also be strengthening the relationship.
Absolutely. And even with a rupture doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of a relationship. I think that's what strengthens a relationship, is being able to get through some of that kind of tough conversations.
You know what, Miss A, first of all, thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for being vulnerable. Thank you so much. And I think, honestly, this is the first step. You asked us a question. You're asking professionals to give you our thoughts. Take what you can. Take the grain of salts that we've given you. But honestly, thank you so much for asking this question. And Doc and I have different views and opinions on this. And I think, honestly, just you bringing this up and bring it up to your significant other, and just say, I just want you to make the best decision that's right for you, and let him or her make that decision where to go from there. But I really do love this question. Thank you so much for taking a long time to get this out. I'm sure this was not easy for you to do. Death and grief at the end of the day are messy. They are extremely messy. And there's a lot of, like Doc was saying, there's a lot of different grief into this question. So thank you so much. Yet again, please, 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 please give us these messages, because this might be your next question that Doc and I talk about. Yet again, you can email us at letstalkaboutdeathpod@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts about this, Maybe for Miss A, maybe you have some advice for Miss A. Send it out to us. We will make sure that she gets it. And Doc, that was quite the question. Are you doing okay?
I'm doing. It just, again, it's one of those things where I know that my wheels will be spinning tonight because that has brought up multiple complexities that I've not thought about. And to be honest with you, that's the beauty of getting these questions, is it broadens my horizon on thinking about certain things, because that is the beauty of working in this field, is that the more and more I hear things like this makes me go, maybe that's a question I need to ask a further client, like things that we don't normally talk about. So again, thank you so much, and please keep sending them in. Share with your friends, help us out, right? Get the stars rocking and rolling. Talk to people about this. Send an episode to a friend you know.
Yeah, write a review. Send us all the love you can, because this is what keeps this going. And thank you so much for taking time to write us that awesome question, Miss A. Thank you so much. Let us know what you think. Write us back with your email if we helped you out with that. And as always, Doc, if you are not talking about death,
then you are not living. Thank you for sharing this with us.